This episode of the School of Laughs podcast is brought to you by Patreon supporter Brian Bates. If you'd like to learn how you can support the podcast through a small, recurring monthly donation, just visit schooloflaughs.com/PATREON. And we also have another sponsor.
Hi, this is Leslie Norris Townsend, and I want to invite you to be a part of the Clean Comedy Challenge 2017 in Pasadena, California, and in Chicago, Illinois. The Clean Comedy Challenge invites comedians of all levels to have a chance to work on a real comedy stage with real comedy pros watching and privately critiquing you. It's Eddie Brill, Dwayne Kennedy, Dobie Maxwell, Jimmy Brogan, Dennis Regan. They'll all be on board for these private critiques and seminars, so you don't want to miss out. It's no auditioning, early fee before May 1st. Go to www.cleancomedychallenge.com. When you register, make sure you mention the School of Laughs podcast so I know where you came from.
Welcome to the School of Laughs podcast, brought to you by schooloflaughs.com. Whether you're an aspiring comedian, a part-time pro, or a speaker who wants to become funnier, this is the podcast for you. We'll break down tools, tips, and techniques to help you get bigger, better, and more bookable. And now, here's the show.
Thanks again to Brian Bates being our Patreon supporter for this episode. If you don't know what I'm talking about when I say Patreon supporter, you can simply donate a recurring amount each month, whether it's $3, $5, $7 or more dollars each month. It gets you on the Club 52 list, where you receive an email each week with specific instructions on how you can take your comedy further, faster, whether it's the business, performing, or writing aspect of comedy. We cover all of that in Club 52. Well, this week on the podcast, we've got a fun, insightful interview with Lucy Sinsheimer. She is the manager at Zanies and also Stand Up Live in Huntsville. She kind of goes back and forth between the two clubs, and she will give us some great insight as to how she approaches booking comics, how she finds out about comics, how much she's inundated with requests from comics, and how much she loves comedy in general. She got into this at a pretty young age. She's just 25 now, been at Zanies in Nashville for 3 years, pretty much right out of college, shot over here and started working, and I think has been a huge positive impact on the club. You know, the club had been kind of doing the same thing for quite a while, and she came in and gave it a real fresh breath and a fresh approach, and I think things have been going really well. We're lucky to have her here in Nashville. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. An interview with manager here at Zanies in Nashville, Lucy Sinsheimer. Well, how's it going, Lucy?
It's good. I'm good. I have coffee. After that tragic loss of the Preds last night.
Did you watch it?
I did watch it. I went out to a concert venue that opened up the venue to watch the game, and it was pretty depressing.
It was very depressing.
You know, it was depressing, but it was like, at least it was a fun game and not a, blowout.
Yeah, the whole time I'm watching it, it's like the energy was great, and we had like 10 breakaways, it seemed like, where we were one-on-one with the goalie, and they just couldn't put it in. I said, well, it's not our night, but at least it's not much of their night either.
Right. At least we didn't, go down in an embarrassing way.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I definitely stayed out till a little bit past the game was over.
Yeah, and those are long games.
They are, and it's like, I know nothing about hockey, so half of the game is me turning to somebody and being like, hey, can you explain what just happened? Because I at least want to learn from watching it.
Yeah, well, I learned last night that the referee blows the whistle when he can't see the puck anymore.
Yeah, that's crazy. That whole, I did not understand that entire situation whatsoever.
I mean, it must be to protect the goalie. Like, if the goalie was sitting on the puck, they just can't beat the crap out of him until the puck magically appears. But still, a millisecond later, and we've been up 1-0.
Yeah, early. It felt like something went wrong. Like, that couldn't have possibly been fair, but I mean, I'm not going to spend the whole day being upset about it. I am. The silver lining is Nate Bargatze's here on Wednesday, so he's not up against the finals.
Oh, that would be horrible.
Which, he's from Nashville, so the whole week he was like, is there any way if we make it, could we move it? Would we want to do it after the game? And I was like, well, if you hold it till after the game, it could end up being that we lose. And then you've got a whole depressed crowd. At least now we've got a grace period for everybody to recover and want to laugh at his show.
That's true. I remember I started in Columbus, Ohio, so the Ohio
really?
State Buckeyes, it's like the biggest football. There's like
Yeah,
four
Ohio like goes hard for
they
sports.
go crazy.
Yeah.
And so I was booked the weekend that they were playing Michigan, who's their biggest rival. They're not even allowed to
gosh.
say Michigan.
Yeah.
They called them the team up north. And they had lost that year, and then we had 3 shows that Saturday night.
Oh, no. Was everybody just...
You could just tell people walking in with their heads low, like they knew they needed a laugh, but they weren't ready to.
Was it at least the day after?
No,
it was
3
right
hours
after.
later.
Oh, see,
Less than 3 hours later.
That's hard.
So we just had the house announcer say, listen, whatever happened earlier is done.
Leave it at the door.
None of the comics are here from that state up north. In fact, your headliner's from right here, so let's not take it out on him. It was really nice, but it was, you could just tell, and that's bad energy to be around.
I feel like every comic has that one story, like, of them having to perform. This is a even worse scenario when they have to perform while the game is on in the city that the game is taking place, like in some like bar or like casino, and the game's just playing in the other room. That's like the true, like, somebody's a road dog when they have that story about having to go up against the game. But
I remember working with Stephen Wright.
Oh gosh, that's awesome.
He's one of my favorites. In fact,
me too.
I got the gig like 24 hours before the gig happened. Like somebody must have fallen out. They need an opener, and I'm like, man, this is interesting. He's a big Boston Red Sox fan, and Boston is in the World Series, and we're doing this show, and it's going to be during the same.
Oh gosh!
And so when I got there, he goes, "Listen, not ideal, but could you just check the score? And if we're up, every time I look over, just give me a thumbs up. If we're down, give me a thumbs down."
That's awesome.
And so the guy had a TV in the back, a little black and white TV with the game on, and I was standing in the corner and just kind of giving the thumbs up or thumbs down, And it was,
did they end up winning?
They did.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, and he got to watch the last 2 innings. So you got to have that
opportunity to feed the score to Stephen Wright.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
When you were growing up and you first started figuring about comedy, who was some of the people you looked up to? Like, you're like, wow, it's
funny because with what's going on in the world right now, I feel like this person has so much negative press. But the first stand-up comedy show I ever went to was Kathy Griffin.
Okay.
So I was, I want to say, a freshman in high school, and it was right around the time like reality shows were like the cool thing going on TV, like The Real World, like The Real Housewives, like was in like the first season. That website, PerezHilton.com, like everybody in high school would like get through like the blockers that they'd put out to like read the celebrity gossip. And she had all these specials out on Bravo. And I was like really into theater in high school. So Bravo theater, it all kind of tied in. So I watched that network all the time, and I'd always see her specials on. And she came out with an autobiography, and I loved it, and I was super into, like, Chelsea lately was kind of a big thing. I didn't really pay attention to Chelsea's stand-up, but, like, the people that were coming out from her show I liked. And so she came out with this autobiography, and the bookstore near my house was having a book signing, but the show in Charlotte where I grew up had sold out. But she had a show in Durham, so we went to the book signing in Charlotte and then drove, like, 3.5 hours to her show in Durham at like the Performing Arts Center. And it was me and my it was me and my best friend and her older sister and her mom, and we all drove to Durham together for the show. And that was the first like real stand-up comedy show I went to. But from there, most venues are 18 and up at least, so it took probably 4 or 5 years for me to see a stand-up show live again. But because I saw her live and I enjoyed it so much, I started watching more comedy. And then in college, like, podcasts became a big thing, so I started listening to a lot of podcasts. And Netflix came out, so I started watching a lot of specials on Netflix. But I'd say, like, seeing Kathy Griffin live was really, like, the first intro for me into stand-up.
That's cool. And you said your friend's mom came along? Did she play
had
well
to have
all?
An adult with you.
I guess you did, didn't you?
Yeah.
And did her mom laugh and find like?
Her mom. Her family was like my second family, and her mom was that mom that would like stay up like later than us, which was always super weird. Like my parents always went to bed really early, but her mom was like always up watching like E. So she was like super into that kind of stuff already. She was really into like the celebrity gossip, and I'd say 85% of Kathy Griffin's show is like making fun of celebrities. And then my first club show was I was home from college. I think I was like a freshman, and I just wanted to see a show. So I looked up the schedule for the Comedy Zone, and I went and saw Jay Farrow,
Oh, that's cool.
who now I've worked with like 5 or 6 times, and he's such an awesome guy and super, super funny.
That's cool. When you were in college, did you get on like the Student Board of Governors planning committee for events or anything like that? Or how did you get into this?
I was pretty like lazy in college. Like I didn't really, I didn't like school at all, like because I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. And then I like got really into watching stand-up probably like freshman, sophomore year, and I just kept watching stand-up. I fell in love with all these comics like Bill Burr and Tom Segura and guys like that that are just like real stand-up comedians.
Right.
Like I think Tom Segura is one of like the few stand-up comedians left that's like just getting famous from doing stand-up purely.
Yeah, not using it as a platform to launch into movies and everything else.
And Bill Burr's kind of like that too. I mean, he's got TV, but I feel like he's mostly famous for stand-up. So I kept watching all this comedy, and I kept thinking to myself, like, I don't necessarily see myself doing it. Not because I have stage fright or anything. I just like I wanted to do something like in business. And I was like, well, you know, there's so many comedy clubs. I don't know anything about comedy clubs, but it's like if you go on Google and like Google like how to get in the comedy business, like there's no like guide for it. Like there's no like comedy business for dummies. Like it's not like an industry that I feel like a lot of people outside of those that are already in it know much about.
Yeah.
So I remember my dad is very much into like helping people figure out what they want to do with their lives, which I'm so grateful for. Like he's always been the guy that like my brother and I will like send friends to that are interested in business. He's just like an entrepreneur. And so I remember like we were having a conversation and he was like, well, what do you like think you could do in comedy? And I was like, well, let's try and like go to the drawing board. Like who do we know that might know something about it? And he had this friend who just like vaguely knew the owner of the Comedy Zone. And he sent me his contact information, and I, like, pretty much like a comedian, just kept bugging this guy. I kept calling him and emailing him and being like, just sit down with me for 5 minutes. And finally he was just like, all right, like, just meet me. So the Comedy Zone in Charlotte's, like, in a basement with the restaurant on top. So I met him in that restaurant, and he just kind of came at me like, why do you want to be in this business? And I just remember I just like fired stuff back at him, and he was like, all right, you're hired. Like, you're persistent enough that I know you're serious about this. So I got hired as like an intern. That's like cool. For the summer between my junior and senior years of college. And I just like filed and like scanned things and all that stuff. But and then at night they'd pay me to like be a hostess, so I could make a little money. Right. But I remember his name's Hef, and he's like my greatest mentor in this business to this day. But he let me sit in on a couple of like booking meetings where the agents would pitch acts, and I just kept telling everybody what everybody was from, because at that time I was just watching everything any comedian was doing and listening to every podcast, and I wish I still had time to do stuff like that. Yeah. But unfortunately, when you actually get a job in the business, it's hard to keep up as much. But Brian and Andrew Dorfman, who own this club, happened to be at one of those booking meetings, and they happened to like that I knew what was going on in contemporary comedy, and pretty much right out of college I got hired here, which is like I'm so lucky. That's because half of my friends that graduated are still, you know, living in their parents' basements. Right. You know, there's the job market is really hard right now, so I feel very lucky that I get to do what I wanted to do.
Oh, it's pretty awesome.
For a long time.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's one of those things, you were looking for it, you're working towards it, you got it, you're like, boom. Yeah. I was curious, in that year that between junior and seniors, when you got when you went back to your senior year, did you switch any of your class load, like any business stuff come into play?
Well, I was already a business major. Perfect. So it was, and to be honest with you, and I hate to like discourage anybody from whatever path they're taking in school, but I don't really utilize most of what I learned in school. Like most of what I do for my job, I had to learn once I started here.
Because it's so specific?
Yeah, it's so specific, and I feel like a lot of jobs are like that now. And college did teach me like structure and showing up on time and going to class and being responsible. But when it comes to like things that I utilize that I learned from my classes, it's slim to none. Most of the things I know from comedy are from living, breathing, working 24 hours in comedy.
Yeah. What's been the biggest surprise? Like, even after you've been in it for a while, what are some things that still surprise you? Like, man, I didn't know this would be part of my job.
I learned a lot about social media my first year here, because social media is definitely, and I think that now it's being taught more in college, but when I was there, like, I wasn't taught much about it at all. And, like, I don't do graphic design myself, but it's something I so wish that I had done, because it could be so much more of my job, but I have to kind of outsource that to other people because I don't have those skills. But yeah, social media was a big surprise. Like, it plays such a huge part in selling tickets, in as a comedian, in gathering a fan base. Mm-hmm. Like, that's a big thing I didn't think of. And like, just general, like, organization, because you look at comedy and you just think funny all the time. Like, it's like, so many people, when I tell them what I do, they're just like, oh, that must be so much fun. Like, you must just have fun being around comedians all the time. And I'm like, yeah, but there's also so much organization that goes into, like, coordinating a weekend.
Right.
Because I do all the, like, talent coordination. So from the moment our headliners come into town, like, their hotel, their ground transportation, everything in their rider. So it's like, you have to learn how to keep everything organized, which was a big adjustment for me, because I'm not the most organized person in the world.
Yeah, that can be tricky, and everybody's different every single week, so they've got different demands, different
totally.
Hotels, different everything.
And for the most part, people are really laid back, but there's still, like, things you have to remember for their show. Like, some people have to have certain things for their show, like Steve-O, like, he does some stunts on stage, and you have to get a couple of different things, and it's like, if you forget one thing, you could mess up his show potentially.
That's crazy. And as far as the social media stuff, just I know everything's different.
Sure.
But if say you need to run social media to get ticket sales going for a comedian, how far back, like, how many weeks is ideal to start get that push going?
I mean, it depends from act to act, but I mean, as soon as you can get something made, it's best to just get it made and put it out there, and then you can, say, put like $20 behind it the first week, a month out, and then see how that's going, and then if it's going really well, stick another $50 on it, and then just keep upping that until, you really can see that you're maximizing on it.
And is Facebook the best so far for you?
For advertising, yes. I mean, there's always those, like, specific internet sensation acts that maybe Twitter is where they got their following. Right. So that would work more for that artist. But I'd say Facebook is probably the most important, because you have the most that you can do. And, like, you can make, like, a video ad for Facebook. You're not going to be able to make a video ad for Twitter,
right?
That kind of thing.
And the targeting is just so much more rich.
Oh yeah, the targeting is definitely, it's amazing. I had no idea.
People who live on that street.
Yeah, I had no idea what you could do in terms of geo-targeting and targeting until I started working here.
And have you guys done anything yet where I don't know what the exact term is for it, but like in the geo sense, where you almost build a wall around a certain area.
Oh yeah.
So when people once they get halfway up 8th Avenue, if they're on Facebook, and that can pop up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we do lots of geo-targeting.
That's cool. When you started working here, now you did work over at Comedy. So how long did you do that before you came to Nashville?
A summer.
Just a summer?
Yeah, just that summer between junior and senior year of college.
So it was during that pitch meeting, you were still an intern at Brian and Andrews?
That they, kind of got to know me, and then I stayed in touch with Hef for a while. We still stay in touch. And I was basically like, I really need to find a job in this business. Do you have anything? And he was like, well, I don't necessarily, but these two guys in Nashville, why don't you hit them up and have a meeting with them? And then I, drove up here, met with them. It went great, and they hired me. It was pretty, it's like literally like a dream scenario, but I also did have to, when I was originally trying to get that internship, wear somebody down until, they would meet with me and listen to me, and then I got to learn from that, and then I got to come here, and now I've been here August 1st, it'll be 3 years.
Yeah, wow, already, huh?
Yeah, and now I have both clubs, so that's been a nice
let's talk about
transition.
Huntsville for a little bit. So describe the club and what's going on down there in the...
So the club's been open since January. It's definitely a different setup than Zanies, obviously, because we've been open 35 years versus being open 6 months.
Right.
It's not 2 stories, so it got like a basic improv layout. If you've ever been to any of the improvs, it kind of looks just like that. And it's different in that it's almost like they like to say dinner theater. Like, they have incredible food.
The meal's a bigger part.
Yeah. But it being a club within the Dorfman family, nobody cares about comedy more than those 2 guys.
Yeah.
I mean, they truly, truly, truly care about comedy. So the food is never going to get in the way of the performance.
Right.
But I would say it's kind of almost a like upscale experience. And it's been going really well. I will say the thing about Huntsville that I think is incredible is I've never seen audiences like the audiences there.
In what
They're
way?
so hungry for comedy. Not that people in Nashville aren't, but there's this energy there that I've never experienced in a club before, where they've never had anything like this before. Huntsville, I mean, most bars there close pretty early. There's not even really a big concert venue. There's a place called the Von Braun Center,
Right.
but that's probably it in terms of big venues. So there's just not a whole lot of entertainment options. So when they're in that club, they're eating up every single word the comedian says. So when you're killing, it's even another level of killing than I've seen here.
Oh, that's cool. You think it's
like,
partly just because of the competition of there's a million venues
there's a million venues
Nashville.
in town, and we've been open so long that people have come to see comedy enough times where
People have forgotten they've seen shows at Zanies.
Yeah.
They've been so many times.
They've been so many times. So yes, there's still the magic of it being Zanies, and it's this incredible venue with an incredible reputation, but it's not brand new. Like, people have seen it before. Whereas, like, I went to see Sinbad in Huntsville, and
Oh, I bet that was crazy.
it was insane.
Yeah.
I mean, he finished his set, and immediately people standing ovation. Everybody in the room.
That is pretty awesome.
It's definitely, there's a magical quality to this being a brand new comedy club in a town that's hungry for entertainment, that's growing. It's set to be the biggest city in Alabama in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And there's also NASA there, so it's a smart town. It's been really cool, and I got to be there, since day one. So I went down and opened the club with everybody and stayed down there for 2 weeks helping train the staff. And there's something to be said about a staff of people that are just so excited for a comedy club. Like, they want to help with everything. When the shows are sold out, they're so excited. There's nobody jaded on that staff, which is
Right.
really cool too.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I need to get down there and check that club out.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Huntsville's always been the comedy shows they've had there have always been good. There's a good local scene, but now they've got the official venue and
Yeah, there's a good local scene, and they produce good shows, but they're also really pumped about the club, so they come out and support all the shows, and they're really, really excited. I find that comedians that haven't had a club yet, they struggle with structure and working their way up, and now I'm really excited that there's a club there to kind of guide them.
That's pretty awesome.
Teach them.
When back to Zanies here.
Yeah, sure.
Let's focus on the new comics for a second.
Yeah, I'd love to.
I know
that's one of my favorite things to talk about.
I know, and you're so good with the comics here. And even when I've had my graduation shows here, you've come back and kind of given them a little, in a nutshell, how you can move on from this night and all that stuff. So for comics anywhere they might be, I just want them to know, your side of your job day to day, what the amount of communication that comes in, because
from new comedians,
and
sure.
just so they can put their call in perspective with the other thousands that just keep coming in.
Yeah, I get every day from comedians wanting to showcase, comedians wanting to host, comedians wanting to feature, comedians wanting to headline. I mean, I get all of them constantly. I'd say my advice is, if you're brand new and you've never done stand-up before, take Rick's class.
Hey, there you go. Thank you. Here's the $5.
But it's so important to me to get on to open mics are such a necessary thing. And every time anybody emails me, I've never done stand-up before, I really want to get on stage at Zanies, it's A, you could take a comedy class, and B, open mics. Like, you can't just jump onto the stage with no structure. And I can't tell you how many times people want to fight me on that.
I can believe it.
I don't have time to do open mics. I don't have time to do this. I just want to do a show at Zanies. I'll bring 500 people, et cetera, et cetera. And I try to... This sounds like a pretentious comparison, but I always try to say this. If you picked up a guitar for the first time, had never played the guitar, would you call the Ryman and ask if you could go on stage?
Right. No, I think it's a fair comparison.
Probably not. So it's like, why are we like belittling comedy to this point where it's like, well, I've never been on stage, but I need to get on stage at Zanies first.
Yeah. Let's say something about how, on the flip side of that, comics that make it look easy have made these people think it is easy. And they don't realize that
those people did the open
all
mics.
that stuff. I mean, I get even from... I get some random emails, and people even take my class, like, what's the best open mic in town? I'm like, the next one.
Yeah.
And the next one. Even if there's 3 people there, even if they're all comics, because you need to hear that come out of your mouth. You need hundreds and hundreds of reps to come. And I always say, don't even think about Zanies until you're blowing out the open mic constantly, and you're getting on some of these local book shows. That's when you want to come over here. Now, I'm correct in saying that, right? I'm not
100%. And no, I feel better that you do say that, because I wonder where people get the idea that it's just like you just get on stage at Zanies. But like, the Nashville scene has grown so exponentially, and I'm sure you could speak to that too, where to the point where we have multiple open mics almost every night. And once you start doing those every week, you'll get onto book shows. And I also am one of the few bookers, I go to the open mics because I want to be fair, and I want to see people that are working hard, and I want to watch people get better that won't necessarily get on a book show right away. And so it's not like I'm not paying any attention, or it's not like I'm like just trying to get people to stop emailing me. Like,
no, that's what I like.
When I tell people to do open mics, like, I'll go watch you. If you tell me, hey, I'm going to do this show and I've been working on some new stuff and I really want you to come pay attention, then I'll come by and I'll watch it. Like, I'm not just saying that stuff to get people to stop emailing me.
I think it's what's great is even like Broken Record show 2 a.m. or something. Here in walks Lucy.
Yeah.
And she's paying attention, and she's sitting down, and wherever it might be, you truly love comedy, and you really love comics that are going after it and doing it. And it has to be the whole thing. They can't just be super nice people and not funny. You're gonna bring people in here and put them up who deserve it. But you also are out there proactively, seeing who's hustling,
and the thing is, like, you don't have to be the best new person. You don't have to be in the top 5. If I see that you're out at open mics every single night working really hard, I'll give you a shot. Like, I'm not unreasonable. It's just there's so many people that will freak out about not getting on Zany's stage right away and just will completely... But I'm like, what have you been doing?
Right.
Because there's so many comedians now. I feel like compared now more than ever, there's so many people trying to do comedy that it's like
it's always
nobody
grown.
gets to skip the steps.
No, there's
no reason to.
There isn't, and in fact, if you don't enjoy that process, and I hate sounding like a coach or something,
it's so
but
true.
The grind of it when I first started, I'm sure every new comic who sticks with it, you start to find the joy in the small successes.
Yeah.
The 3-hour drive back home after a bad set.
Yeah.
You learn more from that bad set than you do from people giving you, what you think you deserve. And just all the friendships you make. Like, and I hate to say this because it sounds like I'm downplaying the military, but it's almost like when 2 comics walk in a room.
Yeah.
You can say, you're a comedian? How long have you been doing it? 15 years? You got mutual respect. Even if you've never seen that person's act or you don't even like them off stage, you've got that shared experience where you're like, oh, you've been through some stuff. So,
every comic I feel like has that connection. And I've heard so many stories about so-and-so playing one club in that city, and there's 2 clubs in the city, and then they met up afterwards to hang out, even though they barely knew each other, because they both have that connection of being a comic that nobody else has.
Yeah, and they know, it's less than a half step away from mutual friends and crazy stories about those people and all that.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So you get the calls throughout the day.
Yeah. Luckily now more emails than
more
calls
emails.
than,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, that's good and bad.
Good and bad,
in
yes.
the old days, they could only ring the phone and you could walk away from that. But now,
Well, and now I have
you're on Facebook and stuff too. I won't give out your information.
Oh, it's fine.
They can track it down, but
I'm so used to it at this point. It's just like when people, it drives me nuts when people I've never met will message me on Facebook, and I'm like, all right, I have an email address. Please just send that there. To speak more to the day-to-day, so I get a lot of emails for showcase, for MC, a lot for feature, and there's not that much stage time. Now, thankfully, there's more with there being 2 clubs. But with how the business has changed, most comics are bringing their own feature now.
Yep.
So the only real feature dates I have are fallouts. So every once in a while, I'll get people who get really upset because I'll be like, I'm looking, and they'll be like, well, I email, my avails every 2 weeks, and I know. And I'm like, man, if I had a date to give you, I would.
Right.
But everybody brings their own feature now, unfortunately. And I think that's affected a lot of people. In some ways bad, in some ways good. Like we said before, comedians have a connection. So if you have a younger guy that you have a connection with that you really want to help out, and you have the opportunity to bring that person on the road, then you're going to bring that person on the road.
Yeah.
And I can't, get angry at somebody for doing that, because being on the road is a grind, and to have a friend with you is an awesome situation to be in.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, for the young comics that aren't necessarily located in New York or LA, that kind of cuts back on their work, which is a bummer. So it's like,
you just got to work harder.
Yeah.
I guess the good thing is there are more shows. There's more ways to get stage time.
Mm-hmm.
Back when I'm not that old, but back when back when I started,
back in the day,
you would never have a comic roll into town and book their own venue and get their followers. I mean, it wasn't possible back then.
Yeah, but now it's happening all the time.
But now, yeah, if you're hustling and you're doing right things and you're promoting yourself enough, I mean, you've got a lot more competition now.
Yeah.
But the cream always rises to the top. So if you're doing the right things, you'll eventually get your people. Part of that's finding your voice and sticking with it so your people can stick with you. What advice do you have for young comics when they're trying? Because I get this question a lot, and to me it's just a matter of time, but they're trying to find their voice, like in their first year even. It's like... Yeah,
that first year is the hardest.
Because you're really trying on a lot of different voices, really. Yeah. First you go through like your idols. I don't think
you probably find your voice for, what would you say, 3 to 5
Seinfeld's
years in?
Seinfeld's like 7 years in.
Yeah.
I think it depends on how many shows you do
and
how much you're paying attention to the response in those shows. But I don't even think you should worry about that initially. If you stumble on something early and you're like, this is what I should be writing for, that's great. But I think you have to kind of go through the joke writing process.
Yeah, your first year should be I have so many people that come to me and get upset because they feel like they're not getting booked on enough shows. And it's like that people that are a year to 2 years in, and it's like your focus should not be whose shows you're doing. Your focus should be on writing.
Yep.
And it should be on going to open mics. And it should be... I've had people say, like, I don't think my jokes are working anymore because everybody here has heard them. And it's like, well, then maybe you should be not necessarily scrapping all those and starting new, but go back to them. Punch them up. Maybe sit down with some comedian friends that you have and work on them together. By the way, there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people... We tried to do a writer's workshop here for a while, and people would get, like, nervous that was stealing, and that's not stealing. I feel like lots of comedians do that. You're helping each other come up with tags, and people are working on your tags with you, and that's perfectly fine. But, yeah, your first year should not be about what shows you're getting put on. It should 100% be on punching up your jokes, work on your jokes, scrapping that, starting this. People get so caught up on what shows they're doing and not focused enough on writing their jokes. And if you focus on writing your jokes more and more and going up at mics more and more, I feel like eventually you'll find that
Everything
voice.
happens.
But it doesn't. Finding that voice has nothing to do with what shows you're booked on.
Right. Yeah, and I think we both like Brian Bates. He's a hard-working joke.
Love Bates.
And there's a guy who he writes so much that it can't help but get funnier because he's writing it. I mean, I think he's written 25 minutes this year already.
Yeah, he this past year has like so impressed me and gone above and beyond. I just saw him do his set, I want to say last week here, and it was like the best set I've ever seen him do, and it was so much new material.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and he's one of those people who's not afraid to try something new on this stage, which so many people get scared to try new stuff on the Zanies stage.
Yeah, let me ask you about that, because you've got a unique perspective. Once the comic's proven himself enough to get on stage a few times here, you would, I'd imagine, rather see them working some new material in.
Yeah, especially for an MC. I feel like an MC could totally work on new material. And a feature, too. It's maybe a showcase spot when you first start coming. Like, I'd say do your best, 7 to 10 the first couple of times. But I couldn't care less if people try new stuff on that stage, especially if they're somebody local who's a feature, maybe, other clubs, but we'll do an MC week here. Like, there's a comic named Hannah Hogan. I don't know if you know her. She did like a month residency, and from that beginning weekend to the last weekend, like, totally like punched everything up, and it was like awesome to watch that set kind of evolve over the whole month. So, like, I think there's no problem in trying out new material here, especially if you're somebody who's on the road and this is your home club and you really want to, like, work some new stuff you're excited
you shouldn't
about.
Have to be doing your road show at home.
Yeah.
That's cool. Let me ask you this, too. With the where do you see, whether it's the feature or MC, like, I'm a real, like, servant type person. Like, I think you should serve the audience, not pander to them or give them, like,
that's the job you signed up for,
right?
Is to make the audience happy.
Yeah. So, like, what do you look for? I mean, I know kind of the general answers, but I think it's good for people to hear from you too.
Sure.
In your opening acts, that would give them more work over somebody that didn't have these features.
A lot of the work that you will get here is MC work, since so many people are bringing their own features. And I think I've had this conversation with Andrew a lot. The MC is kind of a dying art form, which is really sad. And a lot of people go up on stage and just want to blow through the announcements and get right to their material, or get right to their material and then leave the announcements to the end. And it's important to remember that as an MC, it's your job to A, warm up the crowd, and B, do the club's business. Not saying that you can't do material, but to me, the MCs that get the most work here are the ones that have the ability to work the announcements into their material, and that go out there and get the crowd excited, find out who's celebrating something, make them feel special, warm them up, and then keep in mind that they're here to see the headliner too. So it's not really all about you as an MC. And I see so many comics get so excited to get work and forget about everything else, and then end up pissing off the club because, hey, you didn't tell them to fill out their comment cards, or you didn't tell them about the upcoming acts. And there's a really cool way to do that and also do your material. And it's so hard for people to understand that. Like, we only have maybe 4 or 5 people who I think really do a good job at doing that, which is something I feel like I eventually want to hold a workshop for, because it is hard to learn that just without anybody really sitting down with you and telling you that.
And it would be tricky for people that are just doing spots on other open mics to pop in and have that skill set already. I always think any open mic that's not here should be rotating their MCs and letting them get that experience.
And a lot of the time, the open mics around here do rotate MCs. At least they have in the past year learned that that's a good idea to do that. Yeah,
that's great. It's always been said. I've always heard, the MC works for the club.
Yeah.
Feature act works for the headliner works for the crowd. Like, it's all kind of like you've got your own little target audience, and if you remember that, then you'll move up accordingly when you get time. But that's great that you kind of reinforced what I've said before, but in a different way.
And also, people forget that even if it's not necessarily asked of you to be clean as an MC, you should be clean as an MC, because if your feature's clean or your headliner's clean and you're super dirty, it is so hard to follow that. And it's disrespectful. And I'm not the type of person that likes to censor anybody, but you should be able to do a clean set always, in general. I mean, you don't have to be a clean comedian, but you should be able to do a clean set. That's an important thing to remember, especially if you want to get on the road, because I'd say we're pretty lenient, but a lot of clubs aren't.
Yeah, no, I always preach too that even a dirty headliner would prefer a clean MC because their stuff's going to pop more. I mean, and no matter what kind of comedy you do, I mean, Jim Norton has to have a Letterman set or a late night set that he can do.
Yeah.
So there's ways to craft your material in a way you can still be as edgy as you want.
Yeah.
And not dirty at all. So it's just a tool, one more tool in your belt that some comics kind of skip.
Yeah, or they get upset about it, and it's like, there's no reason to get upset. Like, you're going to need to have this if you want to go far in the business. Like you said, every comic that wants to be a comic wants to be on late night. If you want to be on late night, you better have a clean set because you won't be able to do a dirty set whatsoever. So that's another important thing.
How important is their social media presence? I mean, it's got to be important for headliners.
That's so funny.
Right?
I put on my Facebook, like, what questions does anybody have? And somebody asked me how important is social media.
Let's find out.
When you're starting, I mean, it's not crazy important. Right. Your first year in, I mean, I guess just promoting your shows, but also, like, some people, like, are posting, like, about their shows every single day when they're a year in. And it's like, somebody told me a funny story, like, about how they kept seeing all these new comics posting all their shows all the time, just being like, man, I'm so glad social media wasn't a thing my first year in, because I'm so glad none of my friends came to see me, because now that I look back on me a year in, I would never have wanted them to come to my show. But, I mean, it is good to bring people out no matter how far in you are, but I feel like the people that are, and maybe it's because they're the more excited comics, but the people who are brand new now are promoting their shows way better than the people I know that are like 5 to 10 years in.
Do you think part of that's an age thing too? Like older folks are, you know, a little standoffish?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends on where you are in your career too. But there are so many funny people I know who I'm like, oh, you should do more social media, but they're not into it. I mean,
and they don't realize too that just doing some funny it doesn't have to be their stand-up on social media.
No, it doesn't.
Just showing your personality and getting your tribe connected to you is important as much as anything else.
I remember my boyfriend's a comic, and he made a website recently, and he designed it to look like an old MySpace page.
That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's I love stuff like that, like a weird, like, fun way to use social media or web design. Like, that's something unique that, like, I remembered, and then he made like a blog post on it that was super funny, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like, I haven't seen a lot of people do things like that, so I feel like it's trying to, like, tap into a creative way to use it too, because so many people just tweet or just post about their shows over and over again, but, like, why not try and do something different? Video platforms are big right now. Yeah. If you have that skill and can make short, funny videos and post them, I mean, I feel like why wouldn't you?
Right. Who are some of the comics that come through here that you like that do a great job on social media? Just so I can point some people to some examples.
Bert Kreischer.
Okay. Yep.
He does an awesome job. I was just listening to his podcast yesterday. He does, like, every single day he does minute Instagram videos. And then he films all of his podcasts. And he does, like, a lot of just, like, weird, like, promo videos with his daughters, like, of him, like, jumping in the pool. Like, they're all just, like, weird and hilarious, and, like, they're how he promotes his shows. So, like, say he did Wild West Comedy Fest, so he would do, like, a video in his backyard, like, of him in a cowboy hat or something. I mean, I don't think he did that, but that's an example of the type of stuff that he does. Yeah, he's really, really good on social media.
Awesome. What is something that you wish you would have known about the comedy business before you got into it? Not necessarily a regret, but just something like, oh, that would have been helpful.
I wish I would have known the, like, extent of people that were going to ask me for stage time. And I wish that somebody had sat me down and gave me a good, like, crash course on how to respond to things. But I'm also glad that I've been in it, like, 4 years now, and I respond to everybody. A lot of bookers I know don't. But I like to, I mean, I'm sure I've missed a ton of emails before, but I try to respond to as many as possible, and I try to give constructive advice. And I wish I knew that sometimes people weren't going to like that, because when I first started, I mean, I'm 25 now, so I started like 22, And 3-4 years ago, I was pretty sensitive. So to have somebody lash back out at me for not necessarily giving them stage time used to be something that hurt my feelings. Now, I mean, I've never responded in a way that I know that I deserved an angry response. So it's like when I think about it like that, I'm like, you know what? That person has their own issues and they're taking that out on me. And this is their dream, and I didn't give them an answer that they wanted, so that's why they're upset. But it was hard to figure that kind of stuff out on my own, because there really is not, I mean, I have great mentors that have been really helpful, but there's still not like a how-to. And it's the same for comedy. There's not really a how-to on how to do stand-up, so I always try to remember that.
Yeah, people are finding their way.
A lot of people are going in blind, and they really do think that the people that are on stage just one day called the club, and the club was like, oh, sure, you can headline. Like, people actually think that that's how it works. So it's not them necessarily being a jerk. It's just that we're all trying to figure it out.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it's fair. Can you name a comic who doesn't necessarily make you laugh, but you totally respect their business and their following and everything else?
I would say the majority of these guys that are coming out, I'm not going to name names, but these guys that are coming out from YouTube and social media, like, I don't get it because that's not what I grew up with, and I don't necessarily think it's funny, but I do appreciate the fact that they're coming out with content every single day, and it's content that a lot of the general public loves. And a lot of them didn't start off as stand-ups, but they're now trying their hardest and writing, and the crowds really enjoy their shows. So there's a hustle there that I really appreciate, but I don't necessarily find the majority of them to be funny, especially the ones that didn't start off as stand-up comics.
Right. Do you find it hard to turn off your work and have your personal life?
Oh, yeah. That's probably the biggest challenge for me right now, because having the cell phone, having my email attached to it, having Facebook where a lot of people will hit me up for dates on Facebook, not dates, but like for dates at the club, and I like find it very hard to not respond right away. I don't know. I was having this conversation with Brian. He was like, "You always respond to my emails the second I send them, and to other people's emails right away." And I'm like, yeah, that's just, well, I grew up in the age of cell phones. Like, I get anxiety if I don't respond right away. So it's like I could be out with my boyfriend at dinner and somebody could call me or email me or text me, and like most of the time I will pick that up because I'm also like in charge of coordinating everything. So I'm always paranoid that, you know, somebody's hotel wasn't up to their standards or something, this or that. So it's like I kind of have to be on call. So yeah, it's definitely really hard. And the only people I really know are comedians or people in the comedy business or people that work at the club, because I don't have a whole lot of time to go out and do anything else. Do
you kind of regret that, or you wish you had a civilian boyfriend or something that that took you out of the zone a little bit?
And anybody I don't know if you know my boyfriend, but anybody you'll ask, he's the nicest person in the whole world and the least dramatic person, and a very stable and just nice guy. And before we started dating, I mean, we kept things quiet for a while just because we were worried that people were going to be upset or accuse me of giving him more stage time than someone else because we're dating. But he's such a good guy and has such a good heart that, like, when we told people, nobody, like, literally nobody cared. Yeah. Like, I sat down with my bosses and I was like, listen, like, if this is a thing, like, we can figure it out. And they were like, yeah, no, he's great. Like, nobody's gonna be upset. Like, everybody loves him. So I'm lucky in that aspect. If I was dating anybody else, there would probably have been a lot more of an issue. But I mean, he's such a good guy and so kind to everybody, and he's really, really funny.
That helps a lot.
Nobody was mad about it.
Do you have any specific comics that, I'm sure there's probably a few,
sure,
that came through the club to where you're like, I can't believe we got this comic, or I can't believe I'm sitting back here in the green room?
I didn't sit back in the green room for this, but Chris Rock, I mean, that was crazy. I mean, Brian's been around since, I think you said it earlier, like 1999. He's been
here,
running the club,
yeah.
And he's seen everything, and he even was like, this is the biggest thing that's ever happened at Zanies. unfortunately, I only got to see 2 of the shows because I was training the staff in Huntsville. Just to hear his name called and see him walk out to stage, it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. And then the night I went, Nate Bargatze was opening for him.
That's perfect.
So it was like even more special because Nate's been around since, I started here, and he's always been such a nice and awesome guy, and to me, truly one of the funniest comedians working right now.
Yeah.
And I think he's about to just explode.
Yeah, he's right on the edge for sure.
Yeah, so that was really special. In terms of people that I've seen that are became my favorite people, Dave Attell by far. I could talk about him for an entire podcast
He is so
episode.
laid back and cool, isn't he?
So laid back, so cool, such a joke writer, just like a classic. The funniest thing to me about Dave is he calls himself an old hack. He's like, I'm just an old hack. I'm not one of these like cool storytellers.
Yeah.
But he's unbelievably funny. I mean, everything he says to me is so hilarious.
Very concise, and it has like layers to it. And it's just first time I worked with him was in Chattanooga at the Comedy Catch.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so
did he bring candy for the staff?
He did.
Love it.
And we did I think he was there like Wednesday through Sunday. It was like I thought this is kind of a long week, but he was working something for a special or something. But after the Wednesday night show, he's like, so what's there to do in Chattanooga? I'm like, we just did it.
Yeah, that's it.
We went to like a Holiday Inn lounge and had a glass of wine or something.
Yeah.
Like he's like, this is it. I'm like, we can go see Ruby Falls tomorrow if you want.
That's funny.
But he was such a nice guy in the car, and
yeah, he has been nicer to me than I've ever deserved. We just like had like a cool connection. Like he kind of feels like a older brother, father figure type whenever I'm talking to him, and had a blast here. And then I went up to New York and I texted him when I was there, and we got to hang out at the Comedy Cellar. He made me sit at the comics table with him, which is like a huge no-no if you're not a comedian. So, but nobody at the Cellar tells Dave what to do. Yeah. He's the king of the Comedy Cellar, which I used to sneak into when I was, I want to say like 18 or 19. I had a fake ID and I used to sneak into the Comedy Cellar when I was in college.
That's awesome.
My family lives in New York, so I'd go visit them. And that was really, really cool. And that venue to me is just like so historic. So to be treated like Dave Attell's friend there is really special. So yeah, he's definitely one of those guys that came through that I was just like instantly like, you're one of my favorite comedians ever.
That's cool.
I'm trying to think of who else.
What about anybody that's on your list that you haven't gotten here yet that you feel you're either close to or it's like one step away? Like, if I could get this.
I can't think of that. Like, I think we're gonna get in here, but I still have people on my list. Jim Jeffries, I haven't seen, but I'm gonna see him at the Ryman in August. John Mulaney, I don't think these guys do clubs anymore, but it's like maybe they'll pull Chris Rock,
right?
In the next couple of
years. If Chris Rock can do it, come on, Mulaney.
That's why it's like I guess anybody can. Yeah, I'd love to see John Mulaney here. I mean, obviously, I'd love to see Dave Chappelle here. I mean, that would just, I think, be the biggest thing. I guess it would be on the same level as Chris Rock, but Bill Burr, I feel like we could eventually get back in here. I just saw him at Stand Up Live in Phoenix. And that's a much bigger club than Zanies, like 2 times the size. But it was really excellent to see him in a club. Yeah. Especially he had his baby like 2 weeks before. So he had like some fresh dad jokes.
Probably had some of it on him.
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, those are the few people left that I think I'd love to see. I'm like looking at this poster behind you. I'd love to see Eugene Merman in the club. I'll go through the whole thing. Aziz Ansari, I don't think he'd ever do a club again. I don't think he's one of the few guys I don't think really ever did many comedy clubs. I think he kind of went straight to theaters, and there's very few people like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're so lucky. We get like Ralphie May once a month. We get Nate now once every couple months. Yeah, we got some
local guys that are.
And then Kathleen Madigan did her residency last year.
Yeah, let's wrap up talking about her for a second because
I love her so much.
Yeah, every time she was here, I was gone. It bummed me out because I would have loved to come down and check it out. So she did. Brian Dorfman told me like she pretty much wrote her whole hour that year and was checking it out. So what was that like for you? Were you here most of the Wednesdays?
Yeah. I mean, she really did write her hour here, and you would see her, come out the first time, and it was really raw, but she'd still crush. But you could tell she was working on it, and then she'd come back the next month, and it was like a little tighter. Come back the next month, tighter, and then come back, and then it was like perfection. I mean, she to me is just one of the best of all time.
Yeah, she's a hard worker for sure. Great joke writer and good personality on stage.
Great personality on stage.
Like she has that thing where guys want to hang out with her and girls aren't intimidated by her, like that weird thing, which for comedy is a great thing. Yeah,
she's really such a good joke writer. She makes me laugh, and like it's hard. I feel like, especially for people that have been in the business longer than me, it's hard to make me like really, really laugh because I see comedy every day. But she's one of those people that just every time she's on stage, I'm on the floor laughing. I just love the way she writes. I love the way her stage presence, everything about it.
And then lastly, after all these years, do you have 5 minutes in the back of your mind if you needed to get up there and do some time? I know you kind of write jokes. I was in here for one of the workshops, and you had some good lines.
I love to help, which I'm more of like an idea person. Like I can come up with a premise. It's hard for me to come up with like a punchline, but you know what? If somebody had a gun to my head, I'm sure I could figure out something. But there's something so weird to me about people that book and do comedy, and it's like I never want to be like a booker that like put myself on my shows. Like I just love comedy, and I love watching comedy, and I never felt like this huge urge to do it. Like I always was like, I want to run a club, or I want to book, or I want to be a manager. And like now I'm like kind of just getting to the point where I'm pinpointing exactly what it is in the business I want to do. But yeah, I don't know if I could ever do. I did do improv in college, if that counts for anything.
Yeah, that's how I started, man. Nothing more fun than improv when it's working, and nothing less funny than improv when it's not working.
That's perfect way to put it. I mean, it's just like,
oh my gosh, to watch bad improv is like
the worst thing in the world.
Because
it's worse than watching bad stand-up.
It is, because you're part of the problem. If you're in the audience and you're watching a bad show, like some of the responsibility is you to get that show on track. And boy, it's well, thanks a ton. I'm sure I'm talking to you again down the line somewhere.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was great.
Yeah, it's good to catch up, Lucy. Thanks.
Thanks.
Hope you enjoyed that conversation with Lucy. Very smart lady. Really loves comedy. You can just hear that in the way she talks about comedians and about comedy in general. And again, we're lucky here in Nashville to have her managing the club and also helping out down at the Stand Up Live Club in Huntsville, which I've yet to peek my head in that door. I mean to do that here pretty soon, next time I head that direction, and see what that club's all about. Sounds like it's a great fit for that community, and I know we have a lot of listeners down there in Alabama and specifically Huntsville, so I'd love to hear your feedback on that club and what you think is going on there, but it seems like a great fit at a great time for a city that's growing quite a bit. Again, if you would like to take a class, she said it's a good idea. You can join me here in Nashville in August. I'll be teaching the Stand-Up Comedy Level 1 writing class, and those will be on Mondays, August 7th, 14th, and 21st from 6 to 8 p.m. If that interests you, shoot me an email at schooloflaughs@gmail.com, and I'll get you on the standby list. Also, if you are not in Nashville but you want to take a writing class, feel free to check out my Stand-Up Comedy Level 1 writing class online. You can check it out at schooloflaughs.com, hit the online comedy class button, and you can sign up for the Silver Edition right now and enjoy a 20% discount on that until September 1st. Use the coupon code BETTERCOMEDY, BETTERCOMEDY, all capitals if you don't mind, and that'll get you 20% off the silver version, which is the entry level, and you can always upgrade after that and just pay the difference if you decide to go further with it. So thanks again for listening to the podcast. Thanks again to Patreon supporter Brian Bates, who is doing a bang-up job on the road right now. He just was part of 3 sold-out shows with Henry Cho down in Knoxville and knocked it out of the park down there. So kudos to Brian for not only being a former student, but being a full-time comedian who takes it as serious now as he did when he first started. Pretty cool to see. Lastly, another quick iTunes review before we head on out of this episode. This is from Tone Scone. I love the different stories and tips. I love everything about comedy, and these podcasts help me dive behind the scenes. Hey, thank you very much for that 5-star review. If you'd like to leave a review, please do on iTunes. We are hovering at 99 reviews right now, and I'd love to tip it over the 100 mark and try to catch us up to the episode numbers. You know, I think we're in the 140s right now, so You can never have too many iTunes reviews. You know, if you're not sponsoring through Patreon, small way to give back. Okay, enough of me. Thank you guys very much. One last word from our sponsor. In the meantime, stay safe, stay humble, and stay funny.
Hi, this is Leslie Norris Townsend, and I want to invite you to be a part of the Clean Comedy Challenge 2017 in Pasadena, California, and in Chicago, Illinois. This is our 7th year for this one-of-a-kind conference that includes 3 days of learning, writing, performing, and hanging with the pros in the comedy business. The Clean Comedy Challenge invites comedians at all levels to have a chance to work on a real comedy stage or to fill out an ambition on their bucket list just to be a part of the comedy business. Go to cleancomedychallenge.com for more details. When you register, make sure you mention the School of Laughs podcast so I know where you came from. Be a part of the comedy train. Woo-woo!
Thanks for listening to the School of Laughs podcast. If you'd like to hear more School of Laughs podcasts, you can find them on iTunes and Stitcher.com. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. For information on upcoming live and online classes, visit schooloflaughs.com. Until next time, stay tuned, stay focused, and stay funny.